So we have different panelists, different speakers. After that, we will have a discussion and we will have the opportunity for you as participants to also ask questions. So please already start, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat or pose your questions in the chat or in the question and answer function in Zoom. So you will be able to later, the panelists will be able to address these questions later as well. We have this session titled Progress, Challenges, Lessons Learned, and Tools that we need for a sustainable transformation of cities all around the SDG 11, but also related SDGs. And we will address key themes such as access, equality, innovative approaches, and knowledge and education for this course. We want to share progress. We want to give some examples of good practice, share learnings that the different partners had in their professional context. And we want to also point out how especially partnerships can be a key enabler for sustainable transformation of cities. We do have this idea of a vision. We want to create an environment for transformative action, and we want to really have thriving partnerships at the heart of it. We will not just talk about physical space, but also about geographical, social, political, and what type of barriers may be or may not be in these spaces. We will talk a bit about education and learning environments and learners for levels, formal and non-formal lifelong learning. And we will talk about what do we need, what tools do we need data, we need, of course, activism and momentum, and we need citizens very strongly and partnerships for getting this, this transformation done. So without further ado now, and this very brief introduction to the topic, I would like to give the floor to Inga Zaliene. She's the Vice President of the International Association of Universities and Director of Mykolas Romeris University in Lithuania, for her to welcome you all officially and open this discussion. Inga, please, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Isabel, dear speakers, co-organizers, participants, and also distinguished guests. It is indeed an honor to represent the International Association of Universities and also Mykolas Romeris University from Lithuania at this esteemed workshop on SDG 11. Cooperation with the Sustainable Cities Institute, the World Blind Union, the University of Bologna, and the University of Paris-Saclay has been instrumental in bringing us all together for this discussion. And this joint effort reflects the importance of diverse perspectives and inclusive collaboration in addressing our complex global challenges. And cities are the lifeline of our society, housing the majority of the world's population and acting as crucial hubs for social, economic, environmental, and cultural development. We all have made significant progress towards the implementation of SDG 11 in the past years, but numerous challenges remain. And it is our collective responsibility, first of all, to understand the challenge, to learn from the past, and to leverage all innovative tools and strategies for sustainable transformation. And I am particularly encouraged by our partnership with World Blind Union in this endeavor, as their involvement reminds us about critical need for inclusivity in urban planning and development. In shaping our cities, our future cities, we must ensure that they are accessible to all, irrespective of physical abilities. And the Sustainable Development Goal 11, part of Agenda 2030, represents global commitment to improving the lives of billions of people by transforming the way we build and manage our urban spaces. And this pledge is even greater and has even greater significance considering the fact that in 2050s, nearly 70% of world population is projected to live in urban areas. And as we move ahead today, let us remember that universities and higher education sector have a critical role to play in advancing sustainable urbanization. As we are repositories of knowledge and innovation, we are developing necessary tools and strategies for achieving SDG 11. And of course, the most important that we are growing and fostering global citizens who will drive this change forward in the future. This is why we, as the International Association of Universities, expose the whole sector and the whole institutional approach towards sustainability. We are working with all 17 sustainable development goals through our global clusters, and we are implementing Agenda 2030. And this comprehensive IAU mainstreaming methodology harnesses the synergies across various fields of university activities, from teaching and research to governance and community engagement. We must also acknowledge our mission and duty beyond the walls of university as institutions committed to public good, to public service. We are tasked to work hand in hand with partners at the community and city levels. So in closing, dear colleagues, I wish to express my sincerest appreciation to all of those who have worked a lot to make this event happen. And I look forward to engaging with each of you during this workshop, and also we seek to shape the future of our societies that is inclusive, resilient, and sustainable for all. And remember the saying that we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. With this, I would like to hand over the stage to our moderator of today, Isabel Taman from IAU. She will present our distinguished speakers who will further enrich this forum with their valuable insights, practice, and expertise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inga Zaliene. So thank you very much for also stressing the need of partnerships and multi-stakeholder partnerships. And I think that's what these workshop series that UNITAR and UNDESA are organizing also present an opportunity to really work with partners that we normally would not come across, and get some input and see what work is done from other sectors and in other parts of the world. I didn't say that at the beginning, but we're a very international session today, and we will have speakers from, I think, at least 3 continents. Later we will see, but it's definitely an opportunity also for the attendees to have a discussion later and to see what is happening in different parts of the world on SDG 11 and on other SDGs. So before I go to the first presenter, we have prepared a quick engagement tool and a Menti poll that I would like to share with you. And I think my colleague will share the link in the chat. And I will just pull up the slide so you can see also the QR code on my screen. Just a second, sorry about that. There you go. So we want to invite you, just before you hear the presentations, to think about what is an ideal city? How would you describe an ideal city? Do you have 2 or 3 keywords that come to your mind when you see this question in front of you? So those that are not familiar with this, with the Menti tools, it's an online quick survey. So you can either go to www.menti.com and enter the voting code. You can scan the QR code that's now on the screen, or you can go via the link in the chat, which my colleague Benjamin just shared. Thank you for that, which should lead you to the voting poll. So I'll give you a quick second so you can add multiple keywords there, or just one, as you wish, just to answer this question. And you may see that after the discussion, we will come back to this question. Let me just check if it works. It does. Okay, I'm just going to share as well the Menti to see if we already have some responses there. Oh, yes, we have 15 responses already, and they keep coming in. It's great. So we have already the idea of community, and we have idea of sustainability, green, environmental, sustainable cities. Democratic is also interesting. Safe, healthy. It's a public space. Okay, well, I think we will leave this open, and we will come back to this at the end of the presentation. So those that haven't had a chance yet to submit their keywords, you can still do so throughout the next hour or so. And we will move to our first presenters. And yeah, keep in mind the question, what is an ideal city? What do we need for a sustainable transformation? And how can we also contribute to get there? So now it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Here you can see our speakers that will be joining us today. And our first speaker is Jorge Abrao. I hope I'm pronouncing this right, please correct me later. And he's the general coordinator of the Sustainable Cities Institute in Brazil, so one of our session partners here. So I'm very pleased to welcome him. And please, Jorge, you have the floor.
Hi, Isabel. Hi, colleagues, and all the people that are watching us. It's a pleasure to be here, and I will try to talk about our job in Brazil with cities. The Sustainable Cities Institute in Brazil was launched in 2007, 15 years ago. And since then, we work to stimulate cities to go in the sustainable development way. In Brazil, 85% of the people live in cities. That's why it's so important to work with cities in our country. The cities, we believe, are important transformation agents in the world. The Institute developed platforms and tools to stimulate cities in this direction. We have a local initiative in cities, and we stimulate all the cities in the country. And I'd like to share a presentation, a brief presentation, if possible. And I will try to do this now, and if you can tell me if it is okay. Can you see?
Yes, we can see your presentation. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So we work in two. We have two initiatives in the institute. One is our São Paulo network. São Paulo is the biggest city in Brazil with 12 million people. And we start to work in these cities because to do São Paulo as an example for other cities. And after this initiative, we create the Sustainable Cities Program. And we are in about 300 cities in Brazil working with these cities, stimulating these cities. We work with many institutions in the world, the UN, the CEPAL, the Paris Peace Forum, and the World Forum for Democracy too. After this, I'd like to say about our work, how we work, and we have a cycle. And in this cycle, we have 3 points. The first one is understand the city. How can we have a diagnosis of the city? And we create some tools as map of inequalities, perception surveys, and the index of the sustainable development cities. After the diagnosis, we try to contribute with the transformation of the cities. And we create a free platform to the sustainable cities. And this platform is to implement the 2030 agenda in the cities. And after this implementation, we try every year, we evaluate the progress of the cities, and every year we recognize the cities with the Sustainable Cities Award. So that is a cycle that we start with a diagnosis, and I would like to show the Sustainable Development Index of cities now, because I think that's very important for us in Brazil, and I would like to share our experience. And I'm trying to, oh yeah, okay. So the index was inspired in a HLPF meeting some years ago, and after in the high-level political forum, we have the idea, and the question was, can we create a sustainable cities index that we can see the level of the sustainable development in all the cities in Brazil? That is the question that we made for us. And when we return to Brazil, we talk with some partners as SEBRAP and SBSN, and in this project that we have in Brazil, City Nova, and we selected 100 public indicators, and we made the relation with the 17 SDGs. And so we create the index after this relation between the indicators and the SDGs. The process is this, and I will show what happens. What is this index now? This is the first view, an integrated view of the cities. This is a city in São Caetano do Sul in Brazil. And this city is, we can see all the SDGs, and when we see the red color is because there are many challenges in this SDGs. So in this overview, the society can see where are the priorities in the city and cities, and where we can do the investments and the programs and the public policies. The other view that the index permits is when we click in one SDG, here in the health, the SDG 3, we have the indicators that are in this SDG. And we can click in one of the SDGs, in this example, is the vaccine coverage. And we can see how the city is in these indicators. So we can know the challenge in this indicator until 2030. So we have this for all the 100 indicators, and the cities can do their choose after to see the indicators. The other thing that the index permits is the comparison between cities. We have all the cities in Brazil. We have 5,570 cities in Brazil, and we have all this we can compare all these cities, and they can learn with the cities that have solved the problems or and learn with them. So we have this ranking that is to compare the cities and stimulate the transformation, and we actualize this every year. And the other view, the last view that the index permits is to see all the country. Here we have the 5,500 cities in Brazil, And we can see the inequality, the territorial inequality in Brazil. This is the cities are, we can see the level of sustainable development of cities, the very low and until the very high. And we can see that the cities in the north and northeast in Brazil are the very low sustainable development in their cities. So, and with this index, Brazil is the only country in the world that can monitor the progress of the cities in the 17 development goals of the agenda, the 2030 agenda. This permits many analyses, and I will show just one analysis. Here we can see the Amazonia biome. And in the Amazonia biome, we discovered that of the 10 cities with the lowest score, 9 are in the Amazon biome. So we can see the challenge that we have in our country, and where we can put our energy, I think. When we can divide, when we can share the investments, and we are talking with the cities, and we are talking now with the governments too, the federal government, how to use this tool to see the inequalities and to decide for the investments in our country. After this, I told you, we have a tool of transformation, a free tool to the cities with indicators, with integrated plan, with municipal financing. We have 10 big combinations with orientation guides to the cities. Here we can see the 291 cities that we are working, and in these cities we have 59 million people living. The mayors, we have the commitment with the mayors that the commitment is to the mayors is to implement this agenda, and we talk every time with the mayors to have the balance in the agenda and in the evolution. One simple example is when we see one problem, for instance, in the climate action, we have a problem, we make surveys, as I told, and we see that in this city, in São Paulo city, we have respiratory diseases in the city, and 4,000 people die every year because of these problems. And we went to talk with the mayor, with another social civil organizations, and we have a pressure, and they build a public policies that change this situation, and there they forbidden to buy new buses, of fuel powered. So now all the companies are obliged to buy electric buses to solve this problem in these cities in São Paulo. And to end the presentation, this year we are launching, because we are in the middle of the 2030 agenda, and we can see all the evolution of the cities in Brazil, where the cities were in the 2015, in 2015, when the agenda 2030 was launched, and where the cities are now in this period, to see the evolution or not of the cities, and to stimulate the change. And we can see all the SDGs. every SDGs from 2015 until now, and to plan the how can we evolve until 2030. And to finish, this is a Sustainable Cities Award, is when we recognize the cities that are evolution in this agenda. To end the presentation, I will stop the chair here. The chair here is just to say that, in fact, we haven't advanced as we planned in the Agenda 2030. We are in the middle of this agenda. The inequalities and the emissions increase the last 7 years. We know this. So it's important to consider the learning in these years and change some ways. We need to raise the bar, we think, and monitor the Agenda 2030 in a different way. It's important to standardize the measures of the progress and give visibility to embrace it and change the way. We need to create a degree of discomfort in the cities, and in the countries, and gain scale and velocity. And we believe that the Sustainable Development Cities Index is one example, a good example of in this direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for this very interesting presentation and this very useful tool that you shared. We've already shared one link in the chat, so we can share it to the participants, but unfortunately they can't share the chat, but they can pose questions. So please feel free to also share the link to the index later. And we will hear maybe more in the discussion. So I'm going to turn straight to our next partner for this session, which is the World Blind Union. And we have two colleagues from the World Blind Union joining us today. It's Hannes Julien Langreus, he's Program Officer for the Global Program for Inclusive and Accessible Urban Development at the World Blind Union in Nairobi, Kenya. And Benjamin Dat, he's Senior Advisor for Inclusive and Accessible Urban Development, also at the World Blind Union, but in Toronto, Canada. So Benjamin, Hannes, whoever would like to go first, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabel. And this is Benjamin from the World Blind Union. The World Blind Union basically is the global voice representing people who are blind and partially sighted globally. And we're also part of the International Disability Alliance. So thank you. It's a privilege for us to be with you today. And before I actually let my colleague Hannes to introduce you to the work that we have done around the Journal on Public Space, I just would like to share maybe a few points around the current context when it comes to the ideal city for persons with disabilities and older persons. So I hope you can see my screen. And I just would like to share a few points. The World Blind Union and other organization of persons with disabilities, we have been working together. And to be honest, I think we have been all working on accessibility for quite some time in different countries and regions. And more recently, we have been working together with UN Habitat and United Cities and local government to try to understand where we are at when we speak about inclusive and accessible cities. And of course, if you look at the target under the SDG 11, you will see that there is a lot of mentions of persons with disabilities, public spaces accessible to persons with disabilities and older persons, transportation accessible to persons with disabilities. So what do we mean by that? But also more importantly, as Jorge was talking about, like mapping out where we are at in cities, where we are at globally when we talk about accessibility. The first point to really remember is that currently cities and territories face under a demographic pressure. What does it mean? It means, as it was mentioned in introduction, that by 2050, will be 70% of the world population living in cities. What does it mean? It means that also people with disabilities and older persons will represent over 2 billion, which means like we have people who will be needed, requiring, because it's a right, they will need inclusive and accessible infrastructure to live independent life, to live safe life, and to be able to fully participate in society. Unfortunately, the current situation globally is that most of cities do not really offer comprehensive and full access to services, transportation, infrastructure, including digital environments. What does it create? We've seen that there is a correlation between the lack of accessibility, but also the vulnerability in times of disaster. And I think COVID-19 has been, like, unfortunately, an example of this, where we saw that persons with disabilities, as well as older persons, faced increased discrimination because of the accessibility barriers they face in day-to-day life. Difficulties to access information and communication that were shared by cities and other government agencies, difficulties to navigate public spaces, difficulties to access online shopping service, difficulties to access transportation and other mobility services in time of crisis. And this, of course, applies in terms of disasters as well. Globally, if there is one trend we should all keep in mind, is that urban population are growing, and as cities grow, they're becoming less and less accessible. And we see that, like, one trend that really show that is the digital divide. So we're using more and more digital environment in a day-to-day life to access services. But what we see is that cities somehow are lagging behind when it comes to making sure that those services, particularly online services, are accessible to persons with disabilities and older persons. And when I say accessible, I would like to say usable, because it's not because you have technology that necessarily people know how to use it. The positive thing in all of this is that cities are becoming, I would say, the key drivers of development. And of course, here there's a huge opportunity as we are moving forward, and an opportunity to do what? To actually close the accessibility gap. And as we see new projects, new infrastructure being built, there's a real opportunity to actually adopt a universal design approach or an inclusive design approach to actually make sure that persons with disabilities and older persons are actually at the heart of the co-design processes, and ensure that accessibility measures and accessibility rights are not left behind. And I would say this is in that context that the World Blind Union has been working. And we found that one way of addressing those is also to share what Jorge was saying, like to share what cities are doing, what organizations of persons with disabilities and academia are doing to actually find local solutions to those challenges. And I will now pass on to my colleague Hannes that will share a little bit more around our experience and initiative around the Journal on Public Space. Hannes, over to you.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. No, thank you so much, Benjamin, for sharing this and really setting the scene. And we like, for the purpose of this session, to zoom in on a specific initiative the World Blind Union and partners have undertaken recently, and that is the Journal Public Space. As we launched a special issue on the Journal Public Space on universally accessible public spaces last year during the World Urban Forum. It was a result of the partnership between the World Blind Union and City Space Architecture in collaboration with UN Habitat, and was captured in the Abu Dhabi Declared Actions, which was the outcome document of the World Urban Forum 10 back in 2020. Because we saw, we saw that we really want to evidence progress and learnings to make public spaces inclusive and accessible, in line with the SDG 11, with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and also the new urban agenda. And public spaces is really a nexus of where we meet as urban residents. So we also found it very strategic to specifically zoom in on public spaces. The special issue on universally accessible public spaces covers 19 articles, case studies, editorials, and viewpoints from a wide range of cities and local governments, academic institutions, institutes, but also NGOs and organizations of persons with disabilities and urban development practitioners and professionals. Go to the next slide. Yeah, just give us a second. Oh yeah, and as I mentioned, it was launched during the World Urban Forum 11 last year in the city of Katowice in Poland. So various events, side events, but also formal press briefing, which was on UN, live streamed on UN TV. So digging a little bit further into the rationale, in addition to what I just mentioned, is that the organized constituency of persons with disabilities are honestly rarely involved in academic and knowledge production spaces. And of course, this also impacts how the academic disciplines also can grasp, understand, and convey messages and evidence regarding disability inclusion and accessibility. The engagement of organizations of persons with disabilities, as we see it, is truly key to collect evidence and experiences, practices to really inform urban policies, strategies, and actions responding to the realities of this constituency. We saw that there is a need to really raise awareness on what accessibility is and how to approach planning and design from a human rights lens. Because what we have seen working in this sector for quite a few years now is that there is a misconception, or there tends to be a misconception of what accessibility is, despite clear conceptual understandings in global policy instruments, as I mentioned, the SDGs, the New Urban Agenda, but also in the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, also capturing the right of accessibility as a precondition to inclusion in our societies. So just digging a little bit more into the contents and range and topics of the special issue. As I mentioned before, it includes 19 different featured articles, case studies, etc. So just to zoom in a bit on that, it's 7 case studies, 8 academic articles, 2 viewpoints, and 2 editorials. We captured a range of key, like within the scope of universally accessible public space, the authors really put together amazing contents from a wide range of disciplines, but also with a thematic focus on different issues, ranging from age-friendly cities to impacts of COVID-19 measures, DRR resilience, safety, mental health, climate change, the rights to play, mobility and transport, and placemaking, but also how universal design can be integrated in urban planning and design, and what are the learnings from such processes. It covers a wide geographic scope in the journal, everything from Banjarmasin in Indonesia to Barcelona to the city of Gothenburg in Sweden, experiences from Hong Kong, LA, New Mexico, Nairobi, Oslo, Quito, Sydney, and Ulaanbaatar, just to name a few. So with this initiative, what did we learn? And what did we learn from our authors? So I'd just like to highlight a few quick learnings before we close the presentation. The first one is that authors really are make a call to action on the protection and promotion of open public spaces in our cities, as they truly serve as the nexus of our everyday life. Universally accessible public spaces, as I mentioned before, are truly key for inclusion, participation, health and well-being, social interaction, but also to fight stigmatization in our cities and communities. On data and evidence, we saw that there is definitely a lack of data and evidence on accessibility and disability inclusion in urban areas, despite the very strong commitments of the 2030 Agenda, the New Urban Agenda, and legal frameworks. Therefore, there is a need to share practices, learnings, and experiences, as highlighted by Jorge and also by Benjamin previously. There is a gap in inclusive urban development practices. What we have seen is that there is a lack of a common understanding amongst urban stakeholders of what accessibility is, as I highlighted previously, and what inclusion actually means in practice. And because we are looking at cities, and cities are comprised of very diverse groups, and accessibility is truly benefiting everyone in our society throughout our life course. There is a gap in implementation. I think this is not news, and as highlighted in the new SDG 11 synthesis report published. Actually, just now they're having the launching event in New York. at the UN, that there is an alarming lack of progress. Because from our perspective, there are standards and policies, but implementation is lacking, and that there is a need for local and regional governments to articulate actions on accessibility. But often local and regional government stakeholders finds it difficult to articulate commitments and actions. Hence, we need to take perspectives of marrying a policy perspective, a people perspective, and a practice perspective in order to move forward. We also got a lot of learnings and takeaways from authors when it came to participatory and inclusive design. Because representative organizations, as we see it, and as authors advocated for, should be involved as key stakeholders in urban practices, including in research and data collection initiatives. Their expertise and first-hand knowledge are key to shape critical and inclusive policies, programs, and practices anchored in reality. On the COVID-19 pandemic, we can frankly say that it revealed that we are not where we want to be. It evidenced that accessibility has not been sufficiently integrated across systems, practices, and services, truly impacting persons with disabilities and intersecting groups disproportionately. This deepened inequalities and maintained and even reinforced discrimination and barriers to equal education, to health, to housing, and to livelihoods. Lastly, or second to last, that there is a need to shift perspectives in academia. Findings from the special issue suggest that there is a need to broaden the academic discourses and promote a rights-based approach to disability and accessibility, and to truly mainstream this across disciplines. And lastly, we need to move towards a development paradigm where accessibility is put as a core principle. Accessibility is often not seen as a core pillar and component of sustainable urban development or overall sustainability and resilience objectives. Accessibility and universal design must be seen as integral parts of solutions to urbanization challenges. These were a few highlights from the special issue of the Journal Public Space on universally accessible public spaces for all. And we do recommend you to browse the journal online, which is accessible across different formats, accessible PDF, EPUB, and HTML. Thank you so much, and over to you, Isabel.
Thank you so much, Hannes, and also thank you, Benjamin, for your presentations. I think it's very interesting also to see sort of what, based on these articles, you could really draw as conclusions in this way forward. So yes, please share the link as well in the chat to the magazine and to your projects. I think I have a very good transition already now, because you mentioned the need to broaden the academic discourse and specifically address academics as well in taking a more holistic and sort of changing our paradigms, how we work. And now I would like to introduce two speakers that are colleagues from our IAU HESD Global Cluster Network. So I said already that we are a part of the International Association of Universities in this webinar. As that, we have over 600 members, higher education institutions and organizations all over the world. And from two our universities, Mykolas Romeris University in Lithuania, where you have already heard our vice president, and from University of Regina and Luther College in Canada. We have two experts here today on cities. And I would like to introduce first to give the floor to Dr. Roger Petrie. He's a professor of philosophy at Luther College at the University of Regina, and he's also active in the RCE Saskatchewan. He will explain what that is. And in our IAU HESD cluster network with experts working on the SDGs. So yeah, without further ado, Roger, the floor is yours.
All right. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes.
Good morning, well, from Saskatchewan. Good morning, everybody. I just want to, first of all, just mention briefly what I'll talk about in my presentation today. In many ways, I want to show what the problem is for sustaining smaller cities in Saskatchewan, Canada, which is in Western Canada, and two approaches to doing that. One approach I want to talk about is what I would call a whole of region approach. to sustaining cities. Cities are always located somewhere. And if we talk about the need to customize our cities to our regions and what those regions have to offer culturally and ecologically and from a livelihood basis, I think something we are doing in Saskatchewan called a regional center of expertise on education for sustainable development is quite important. And then a second initiative I want to talk about is through the International Association of Universities, where we have developed clusters of universities on each continent devoted to different sustainable development goals. The one I co-lead here from Saskatchewan is on responsible consumption and production. So in many ways, I'm kind of arguing that we need the other SDGs to help out when we're talking about sustainable cities, and we especially need universities to do that. So what's the problem in Saskatchewan? Well, we have a number of challenges. Saskatchewan is probably the most landlocked province in the country, furthest from any navigable waterways, high transportation costs. Our urban population, despite living in a beautiful prairie ecosystem, is not particularly educated and or connected to what our prairie region has to offer in terms of customizing our production with our natural available resources. We also have small cities. And so here we're talking about cities of 200 to 300,000 people that are needing to compete with much larger urban centers, thinking about Calgary and Edmonton just to our west and Winnipeg to our east, and of course, globally with very large cities, and the role that customization of our production and consumption systems to our region can play in making us competitive cities. And also we have a fairly short-term planning horizon typically for our businesses and our municipalities. We have somewhat low regulatory standards to attract investment. Of course, a lot of places have done that, but that in turn means we don't set the limits we need for actually achieving a lot of the sustainable development goals from a business perspective. So how can we address that? Well, what I want to talk about is an initiative of the United Nations University that has been going on since 2005, where regions have come together, where you have often led by cities in particular, to try and facilitate education needed to address the local sustainability issues that are identified by common stakeholders. And in many ways, it shifts the paradigm of what cities are doing. So often cities are quite extractive of people and resources from their regions. And this tries to flip that to see cities in terms of service. And how can they serve? Well, if we think of a strengths-based or capacity-based approach, cities have a lot to offer. They have a lot of specialized labor. They have, of course, often seats of government, so a lot of good regulatory standards and standards of good governance. And of course, they are places of surplus human capacity, right? If you think of the need to link up our rural and urban areas, rural areas are surplus natural capital, cities are surplus human capital, and both are a focus for sustainable development. And so as what we've then worked on is how do you connect the players in a region to try and work on the education needs? And so here is an initiative of the United Nations University where regions structure themselves to identify what are their problems, what are the governance structures we need, who do we need sitting around the table to do that, and then build the social capital through what is called a regional center of expertise, which enables the kind of social capital formation. And so I would really point you to that link there, the global UNU RCE portal that has a whole database of projects that RCEs around the world regularly report on. These are flagship projects, and these are really, really important. Of course, another thing that that cities have is typically higher education organizations. All right, so this is the surplus human capital that has time to innovate on sort of the best questions and best solutions, working with local sustainability practitioners who are scholars in their own right to build regional living laboratories. And so what I'm interested there is, of course, how do we build the self-awareness that citizens need in order to do that? And so the last slide I want to just show you quickly is a part of a global cluster through the International Association of Universities, where each SDG has a cluster of universities on each continent to work on, deliberate, work together on those SDGs. And so in this case, this is the SDG 12 that we co-coordinate from Saskatchewan with our various global partners. But the key thing here is that we no longer see our regions competitively working against each other. We see them working collaboratively, and universities in many ways able to share recipes of best practice that can be customized to local conditions, local circumstances, in order to have a viable global systems. Because ultimately, as scholars, we don't want to leave any university behind. Why? Because of the huge loss to human capital anytime universities do not succeed, but in turn, sustaining that knowledge base for future generations of the wider society. And so I think this is another important initiative, and I would direct you to the link there as well to find out more. So I think I'll stop at that point and turn it over to our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Roger, for this presentation and really giving us a bit of an idea what's been happening on the ground. Our second speaker, also from a university, but from Lithuania, is Paulo Alexandre da Silva Pereira. He's the head of environmental management laboratory at the Nicolas Ramirez University, as I already said. Paulo, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to share the ideas that we have been promoting here in the lab. I don't know if you are seeing my screen. I think yes.
Yes, if you can go on the presentation button, then it's full screen. Yes, perfect. Thank you so much.
Great. So the work that I will present is about a bit on the ground that we have been developing here in Amaru, that under this cluster of or this goal of sustainable development in the cities. We had implemented some research. We had been working on several projects when you would integrate stakeholders and especially the community and the university to embrace them, how sustainable development goals are important. And in this particular case, sustainable development goal 11. So this is part of one of the KPI of the university that you can build partnership stakeholders towards the development of a sustainable city, and on different parts, especially on social and environmental, we have been developing research towards this. But before I go to our research, we want to understand, and we did a work focus on sustainable development goals. But before, the cities we are living in an urban world, so most of the countries are urbanized, and especially this development is on the developing countries. So it's expected that in the future, above a lot of people, about 60–80% of the people live in the urban areas. So basically, the trend is that you have to make the cities more livable, and people could live better with better conditions, and the well-being will increase, which is not the reality today. So Sustainable Development Goal 11 is towards this. So we here in Lithuania, especially in Vilnius, but also in different cities, have been working on this. So how this thing of the universities and how we as higher institutions, education institutions, can promote this. So one of the things that we can make is that we can create research capacities and develop with people to investigate sustainable development goal topics. Another thing that we can foster as institutions is how we can create innovation and knowledge, how to contribute to this knowledge for a better society, and how we can cross our disciplines, because nowadays it's impossible. We study environment without overlook the economy or the society. So this is also something that we need to foster in our programs. Also, so how we can develop more research in this SDG 11. There are so many things to know in the cities, and you need to invest more in projects, because cities are getting more and more deteriorated places because of greater flux of population, and this can increase social problems. So what we can do and have been done is how to establish in different projects assess urban ecosystem services, and how these different areas can supply different goods to the population, and that they can increase their well-being. Another thing is that how we can work with the students. This is also an important target. So how we can mobilize the students for action, how we can make more aware of the future more sustainable, and how it's important to take care equally about the environment and the society and the economy. So towards this, one of the biggest challenge that we have to try to implement it at Mykolos Romeris University is how we can promote education for sustainable development, how integrate this in the programs, and how they can, with this knowledge on SDGs, how we can get a job, because in the end of the day is what the students want. So this is the ultimate target that we need to foster. And capacity building, how we can build people that can develop this outside the academy, because we have a theoretical knowledge, but in the end, it's our students and the people that whom we have raised their awareness. It's the people to go establish this, not as academics. So this is also important as well. So what we try to do is making more classes out of the classroom, bring people to the field, make them understand how the different components of the environment operate, and why this is important. We can have sustainable cities. So another thing that we have been done or trying to implement is the investment of courses on urban sustainability, and how these students can be aware of this as well. And finally, we have several students that start to be voluntary and create a club of sustainability. And inside this club, of course, they are also focused on SDG 11. Another thing is how we behave as institution, because we can tell a lot of things, but in the end of the day, how we behave is how people perceive us. So we have to include SDG university in practice. This is a bigger challenge, because this is universities are very heterogeneous places with different ideas, with different strategies, and this is a very hard thing, but is some way that we should go. Otherwise, we can do it by example. And the management that being aligned in the SDG principles, that I'm very happy that the director of our university, she's really fighting for this be true today. So there are several initiatives that have been done that have a sustainable campus. Okay, so have healthy green areas, have improved very much the recycling, reduce the waste, having green areas in the campus to increase the resilience against extreme events, heat waves, floods, and so on, and reduce the carbon dioxide emissions, increasing the consumption of renewables, for instance. Another thing that the institutions need to do is do it by leadership. So why can be leadership? So we have to have the courage to go outside and show how good we are, and how energy we have to establish all these principles, and build the bridge to as an example with the private sectors especially. So, and show how compromise we have to these principles. So this also involves advocacy and commitment, and it's important to build bridges, especially with local authorities, to try to engage them on this principle of sustainable cities. Is not always easy, because there are different interests in discussion. But anyway, we are going on this direction. And final, but last but not the least, that we need to lead by example. So this is one of the things that at least the group is trying to go. So we have been developing several projects on urban areas, based on teaching and creating programs, or European Union projects towards ecosystem services, and create cities more resilient and healthier, and how urban gardens can be important to food production and to reduce the impacts of climate change and so on. So this is one of the several research that you have been developed, okay? So, but before, we have been focused on different targets. So, sustainable citizen communities, they have different targets, and we cannot cover all, but we covered almost all. So, we want to be focused, especially on target 2, when you can study the accessibility, as the colleague before spoke about this. I will show you later. Another thing that we have been done is that trying to engage people, different stakeholders in the discussion of the city. Another thing is that we want to develop studies that will give value to the natural and cultural heritage in the cities, and how to make people create cities resilience against climate change and other kind of related disasters. Another focus of what we have been done is try to study how we can mitigate their pollution, what is the role of the green areas, what is the importance to reduce the traffic in the cities. And we made this with research. Now we have a small project with the students that I will show you later, and how to make the public green areas more attractive for people to visit and to increase the well-being. So this is also, we have been studying the ecosystem service supplied by different nature-based solutions, including urban green areas. And finally, the target 11B that we have been working is that making the cities more resilient in the context of the CENDEF framework, especially regarding disaster risk management at all the levels. So, around the world.
Excuse me, Paola, would it be possible to wrap up soon? Sorry, I'm really sorry because we're a bit behind time. Thank you.
Soon. This is because question of the time. So we have been working in different contexts in the world, in Kolkata, in Portugal. We have been also working in China. We have also been making an assessment with experts. And one important thing is that SDG 11 is not prioritized by experts. But this is something that we should retain for the future. And assessed also the flood regulation in Vilnius, demand and supply. And they have different works to make a transition from a gray city to a green city in different levels of research that we presented. Also worked about the benefits of the nature-based solutions, working on the services and all the service, because nature-based solutions not have only benefits, have also problems associated. We study accessibility in different areas, so ensuring that this Vilnius in Lithuania is much more accessible to green areas than in others. And we have a new project as well, where we studied the impact of urbanization and climate change in the city livability. So we basically covered several targets with this. And this is some works that have been developed with the students, that you create an app for them to monitor the weather conditions and the air pollution, to make some kind of small research. And we have some actions in the campus. So this is the campus of Romaris, because this is a very green campus. So we want to monitor vegetation status, impacts of the management of vegetation quality, climate regulation, flood regulation, air quality regulation. So many things are going in study the site. We have also meteorological stations, and we also use new technologies to assess vegetation as drones, as you have here some photos. So this is the campus, and we assess the quality of the vegetation. So in this case, the red is the best than the green. So just to understand a bit the legend, you have here other cases of the assessment and so on. So I think I wrap up everything very fast. Thank you, Isabel, for having me.
Yes, thank you so much, Paolo, and sorry to cut you off there, and I'm sure we can find a way later to share the presentation slides also with attendees, so they can look a bit more in detail at these really great examples, showing how to lead by example, the strategy, and then the student project. As we have one more speaker left, and I would like to give her the floor straight away, I will just say—
I'll stop to share. I'm sorry. Yes,
perfect. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to introduce our next speaker, who is Daniela Piana. She's the chair of political science, rituals, and legal performativity in the digital age at the University of Bologna, but she wears many hats. So she also works as a coordinator for the rule of law and digital citizenship at the LUASS in Rome. And she's a permanent invited scholar at the ISP École Normale Supérieure or at the University of Paris-Saclay in France. So yes, Daniela, I think I will give you the floor now. 10 minutes, maybe even 9, and then we still have a couple of minutes for our discussion and questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabella. I will try to make it in 9, I promise. So thank you very much for having me on this extremely stimulating session. I think that I would like to spend my 9 minutes to say a word about why cities is a very nice perspective from which we can see SDGs in many ways playing as they were and they are as an interdependent system. So we wanted to fight inequalities, that's the main point. But we do know that inequalities take a very specific significance when they are observed in context. So there are many answers. We have been listening to our speakers and we have on the table many solutions, piloting cases. I think that there is a red line that is more or less shared by all of us all over the world, which is that what we want is to have a city where learning is really a method of governance. Why learning? Because meantime that we use technology to trigger changes and improvements, at the same time the cycle of life of people and the context of life is changing, and the paces of change are absolutely different. So we wanted to have a way to make them tuned up and to readjust all of the way, and learning is the only solution that we have, sort of an overarching principle, right? So what we wanted to share here, first, a concept of space. I do not take a second of my time to elaborate on this point. We have many works written by scholars on social contract and inclusiveness of city. But what I wanted to present is a sort of a couple of solutions. They are coupled because one part is the training, part of a more comprehensive method to set up a governance in cities when they are approaching a long way of digital transformation. The basic ideas that are underlined underneath my, if you want, very practical solutions are knowledge transfer, connecting people and co-creation, so design of public governance and public services, having people already engaged. Now the point is how to do it. And then fighting inequalities through, of course, the help of data, but not relying only on data, because, we know that when we understand how social and economic inequalities are living in the city, data may be very helpful, but we do not want to miss a part of experience that is in itself a sort of a repository of knowledge. Why? Why this is so important today? Because today we see that in many cases all over the world, the digital tools are incorporated into cities' governance in order to trigger changes and chances to have better life. So the idea is we use artificial intelligence, robotic, and blockchain, data trust. All these kind of devices. I do not take a second once again to elaborate on this, but the point is that we see in the digital technology a sort of an opportunity to trigger improvements. Secondly, we try also to regulate all this in order to have a protection of fundamental rights that is entrenched in rules that are clear to everyone. So a sort of baseline of protection in terms of transparency, on safety. And of course, in this respect, it's very difficult also to make equality a reality. We wanted to have equality as a principle, but we want also to have it as a real way of organizing governance. Third point, we cannot rely on technology if we wanted to have safety, transparency, readability of governance of cities that are realities for lay people. Lay people are very different. They face different challenges and in different, steps of their life cycles. So in fact, we have these principles in the design, but we also wanted to have a sort of a capacity to respond to the needs of persons. Now, these are challenges, of course, but they're also opportunities. First, a solution. This is a very simple thing. I see, you should not expect something that is, lunar in a way, a sort of an explosion of originality. It's just to try to rationalize things that we usually do in different sectors or in different moments of the governance. The idea is that you have a city that is governed on the basis of a cycle, and this cycle is based on learning. First point, the design of services based on needs map. We need to map the needs of people with a typology of needs and a typology of groups that is evidence-based. And here, of course, research institutes, universities may be very instrumental to support with sound methodologies to map the needs. Once that you have a co-participative design in the governance, then you implement. And then you have another moment of learning and training, which is targeting policymakers. This is the moment in which you need to do what you have promised to do, so you need to deliver. And then we need to have a training momentum for policymakers. You need afterward to assess what you have delivered and to assess whether or not, and maybe it is not fully, the case, whether or not you have met the needs. It may be that you didn't. So in this case, once again, you need methodologies. Often universities are quite good in setting up methodologies to assess the policy outcomes. And then with these results in your hand, you need to do something more. You need to raise the awareness of the citizens. Citizens have the right to know not only that you have tried to meet their needs, but also the reasons you have not been successful fully. And then on the top of that, you build a second, cycle based on learning. So in this case, you have a sort of a learning/training momentum that is differentiated functionally on the basis of the target that you want to target in order to have everyone involved, but not in a babele. It is not an entropia. It is, rationalized. Now, second thing that I wanted to share with you is a program that we managed to set up with a fantastic and amazing network of universities all over the world. We managed to have them involved in order to launch a program that we named World Educational Heritage, WEH. World Educational Heritage is a very simple idea, but is very much revolutionary. Here, I would love to use this word. The idea is that in many different contexts, we produce a lot of contents of knowledge. We do it because we are universities, academia, research institutes. You imagine how many PowerPoints today. Look, how many contents we have produced, right? So now, if you imagine that the positive externalities of these contents of knowledge are put at the disposal on a platform in short and very simple simply accessible, handy, format, such as video with short, text and a test for learners in order for them having the awareness whether or not they have learned something. And then you have this, with an history. So it remains, you play on the continuity. So we launched this program and we engaged experts on simple themes and topics in order to review the contents and imagine pedagogies that are tailored on the basis of the needs of people, because some people may have different needs and may have different ways to learn. So that's the idea. Now, we think that if you have a city that I would love to call Futura as the city of the future, and you incorporate a small, link to VH, which is very easy because, it is just a matter of creating a system awareness among the universities or also the academies in the private sector. Imagine how many contents of knowledge you have. Then you have managed to trigger a learning cycle without creating an unsustainable mechanism of governance. Because once again, and I would love to stop here, we do not want to have the changing processes as a way to create a sort of an extra structure of, heavy governance and proceduralization. We need to have it simple and real. And we think that Futura and VH may create good opportunities for policymakers and citizens to gain really their momentum of learning in the life cycle of their life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniela, for also Sorry, thank you. So I think now it should be fine. So thank you for connecting the dots there and for really stressing how it's important to learn and how to connect learning environments and different knowledge systems. And I think it's nice that you said that we will have all these presentations as tangible knowledge, and we will be sharing them with the participants after on our webpage and maybe linking to the concept note. So it's all in one place. We have around 15 minutes left, and I would really like to be able to address some questions from these great presentations from the participants. And we had the question of what is an ideal city originally as a guiding questions, where you all also contributed to. And I'm just wondering if, so Daniela said this is something that she has been working on as well with students or with partners. This idea. So there's one question, for instance, on clean cities and clean streets and how change behavioral actions. Maybe I can just put that to you, Daniela, for like a 1 or 2 minute response, and then we'll look at some other questions just as a start. Thank you.
Thank you. This is, I take this question with a lot of pleasure, and I would say also with some emotion. I must confess that part of the ideas that I shared with you came from the interaction with a nice group of students. In 2017, I managed to try to make with them the first exercise. It was a piloting and very experimental practice. I asked a group of students who was not able to share a common language to design, really to paint their ideal city, and the principle to provoke a sort of a reflection and the painting activity was ideal city is imagine that is the place in which you would love to live with your dearest, right? At least. And each of them, they made the painting. And I have asked them to make it again, but as a choral, a collective exercise, in order to see whether or not there is a difference. And I was amazed to see to what extent, on the one hand, you know, the culture and the origin matters, because each of them carried in the heart maybe the experience of missing something in their cities, in the real city, so having a desire, right, a sort of a wish. And at the same time, there was something in common. And the thing that was really in common for all these people coming from many different countries was making accessible, creating, you know, access. And if you cannot ensure that you have access to one thing, for instance, the park, so green space, double the green spaces and make it 2 green spaces, 2 parks, right? And I think that here we have something on which we must reflect upon. Access. Access means that if you are citizen, you know how to find the access to the response to the need that you have, how to find it. So that's the reason I feel that learning is so vital.
Thank you so much, Daniela. And I think that's an exercise that you just described. Maybe we have some people in the audience that are lecturers or teachers or are active in communities that can try to replicate this exercise as well with in their networks. And also thank you for this bringing up the idea of access. I mean, I think I might just hand back to Hannes and to Benjamin, because that's something that you very strongly stressed in your presentations. There is a couple of questions in the chat there. Some of them are quite specific, but I think the question of access and how not just to green spaces, but also the access that you mentioned as well in terms of inclusion. Is that something, how can we learn, how can we change our ways of working there as different partner organization? Maybe that's something that you want to comment on or respond. I feel we have very complex questions here, but you may attempt to do so. I think Benjamin, you're unmuted. Would you like to comment?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, like, do you mind, Isabel, sharing the result of the, you know, the question around ideal city? I just would like to get to sense.
Absolutely. I had it, and then we can, because we didn't go back to that just because of time. But if we compare that one to sort of what we see also in the question panel, there's a questions about air, there's questions about health, and about green spaces. So I think this idea of an ideal city being clean, being green, being safe, equal. There's also a point that says education for all, which of course from education perspective I very much like. Barrier-free, equal access to resources, psychological safety. We have also mental health there and quality of life. So we have quite a few indicators that are probably also reflected in the subtargets of SDG 11.
Yeah, and something like, I just would like to do a quick reflection around that. I found that fantastic because actually the tool to address those already exists, and it's the New Urban Agenda. And the New Urban Agenda is the commitment that cities, local governments and academia and civil society agreed on. And very often, like, I know this is a tool or it's an agenda that is not really well known, but actually if you combine the New Urban Agenda, which also already include action on how to make safe, green, accessible, peace, inclusive, healthy cities and communities. If you combine the New Urban Agenda with some of the tools that already exist that have been mentioned, then you get really a chance to actually change attitudes, develop policies that are fit for purpose, and learn from each other. I think when I look at the question around whether it's around housing and how we change our behavior towards the environment, something that comes to mind me directly as an urban planner and working in city planning is like, how do you break silos? The most successful initiative I've took part in cities is actually where we invited designers, planners, users, representatives from the government to actually sit at the table together and discuss the solutions. And I know by experience that, it doesn't happen all the time, but when it happens, you really get a chance to actually develop policies with a real buy-in and also a real ownership from diverse stakeholders. And I would just let my colleague Hannes just to add a few things, because we are in New York currently, and I would like Hannes to share some quick insight from this week as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Benjamin. And just to very quickly add, because moving forward from where we are now on SDG 11 implementation, I think very much is about learning. And I really, really appreciate how the component of learning has been cutting across all the discussions today. And I think it's time also for the global community, national, local, and regional governments to learn from what works, what has not really worked, and what can be done differently. And it's also very clear from being here in New York during the high-level political forum that the next step is the SDG summit, and then the summit for the future next year, and so on. But it really seems like that the talk of the town as the way forward is localization of the 2030 agenda. So the question is always, okay, localization, how do we do localization? So many discussions in New York now are focusing on unpacking what localization is, and it will also be a key component during the upcoming SDG summit. From the perspective of disability inclusion and accessibility, something we also wanted to highlight from our side is, what does that mean from an accessibility? How does accessibility and localization marry together? How do they come together to really ensure that we fight inequalities in our cities and communities and promote a human rights-based approach? So what we have done together with our close partner, United Citizens and Local Governments, just very quickly, is that we have, during the HLPF, fully launched a policy brief on localization to solve the accessibility crisis, with recommendations for national governments, but also not only on accessibility, but also on the role of local and regional governments, which has to be capacitated and empowered to lead on localization efforts. So I will share that in the chat. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, these are both very great points. So please do share it. I wasn't familiar with the new urban agenda, so I will look at this after. I'm just seeing, well, we have a couple of minutes left, and I'm seeing there's a question addressed to Jorge on the sustainable cities. Maybe you would like to just briefly go back to that. So the question is, can you share the process of how this tool was created and implemented and funded? So I think this is something in the regional context, and also the question, would it be transferable to other cities or countries? Because you have presented the example for Brazil, but maybe you have already thought about transferring this tool to other contexts. Could I just address that question to you briefly, 1 minute?
Thank you, Isabel. I think that we can share the tool, and we are available for this. And just one thing is about the ideal city. One thing that I think that is very important is that the distance between the politics and the society are growing last year. And so democracy is very important for us. So we need to guarantee the participation and the transparency in the cities. We had a very bad experience in Brazil in the last 4 years. And with an authority government, we had many problems, and we discontinued many important agendas. So I just like to emphasize that to aprimorate the democracy in the cities with participation spaces is very important for this ideal city.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for this very important point. So I'm seeing quite a lot of questions, but I know that we're walking towards the end, and I hope we can have a couple of more minutes. But I would just like to give our other speakers the possibility, maybe Paolo, to respond as well, and to say connecting to what has been viewed before. Yeah.
Okay, so what you have to try to come from the academy, that is my field. I really think that cities are in a big challenge, not perhaps at a global challenge, because the population is increasing very fast, and in some parts of the world, the infrastructure is not growing according to people's needs, and this is creating even more poverty than before. So cities from one part can be a place of opportunity, but they are becoming a place of poverty because of things are growing too fast and without planning, especially in the developing countries. And this is a big challenge that we have to face. And it might be an impediment for several countries to achieve sustainable goal 11. So for many, it's already an utopia, it's already a mirage, reach this goal because for different for COVID, because of the question of the war and so on. So, but the issue is this. So we in Europe are more aware perhaps of the importance of green cities and how to the benefits that may have for the well-being. But this message still, for different political reasons or social reasons, it didn't reach elsewhere. So the examples that we have here to make the cities more green are important. We are reaching an important agreement here, but also we have to go to other important issues. Is that the implementation of nature-based solutions and better environment, green cities have also negative aspects that have several trade-offs that somehow need to be tackled. So this is also something that we researchers need to understand, and to understand another thing that not maybe controversial, but not all the green is healthy, meaning that having different kind of nature-based solutions that are lawns full of pesticides, herbicides, managed by tractors, this is not a healthy thing in any situation. And instead that you want to improve the city quality, you are polluting the soils actually, and you are polluting the waters, and it increases the exposition of people to diseases. So basically, we have a lot of challenges and how to make cities more livable, and somehow do not try to destroy the natural ecosystems, the natural ecosystem, just to make things more beautiful, and look for the aesthetical part of the things instead of looking to the functionality of the things. Because, for example, cities are expanding and they make some garden and they think this garden will function better than it was before, which is a mistake. So there are many challenges in the city planning, and it's very difficult to involve the stakeholders in all this because each one have their own interest. But in the end, especially in developing countries, there is a need to understand how cities are developing and how this is damaging the environment.
Thank you so much, Paola. And I'm just learning that we have a small extension for our session. So we have a couple of minutes more to discuss and to take questions, which is great, because I was about to turn also to Roger now, because Paola has mentioned also this part of the city. But maybe you can, because I know that you work a lot with the city council as well and with local actors from the university, maybe you can stress that a bit, how this can help, like because we're faced by very like complex challenges. And often we cannot face them just from one of our corners. So maybe you can just illustrate a bit, because I've seen I see a lot of questions are saying that it's very tricky and there's a lot of problems and challenges before 2030. So maybe we can try to find a way around that. Roger, would you be able to attempt a solution to finding process?
So, I mean, part of it is building those new networks, that new social connectivity with very lightweight structures, right, that don't create additional burdens for people. And so when you bring groups together, I mean, I'm a philosophy professor. We've been talking about the ideal city since Plato's Republic. So, and today is Bastille Day also. So where it's all about freedom and autonomy and citizenship and democracy. But for me, then, the question is, what are the core ethical values that when you come together to build new connectivity, everybody is agreeing to? And citizenship, I think, has to be there. But I think there's another concept that we call sustainable livelihoods. There's been a lot of research on the idea of sustainable livelihoods. And I think within that, the idea that each person to have dignity ought to have a sustainable livelihood is something we need to look at. And the other convening principles, I mean, look at some of the ethics of sustainable development in terms of cooperativeness, patience, self-sufficiency, respect for nature, mindfulness of limits, employment of critical thinking and creativity, and understanding the constraints we're living in as opportunities for new discovery, right? Those are the principles we need to build in to whatever structures we are when we convene together. Now, a few things we've done in Saskatchewan, our universities have built formal connections with the nonprofit sector. So we have a not-for-profit and voluntary sector studies network. We've connected directly with different levels of government. So we've built what we call the Johnson Choyama Graduate School of Public Policy. And as you build those structures, you can then bring in the SDGs into those structures of connectivity as a basis for focus, which is what we are doing with our capital city here and municipalities across the province. So I guess those are some, as a philosophy professor, those are some recommendations. Look at some of the ethics, the values, and build those into the structures as principles for convening.
Thank you so much, Roger. And I think, yeah, sustainable livelihoods and looking at what actually going a step back, I'm seeing what connects us and where we can really work together is something that we can do. Maybe I would just give each of the speakers the words for maximum a minute and say what their key step forward or their key takeaway from today's session is. Maybe it could be a nice way to also close the session, aware that we are not going to get to all the questions, unfortunately, today, but that we already had quite a rich discussion and we'll share with the participants after. So maybe I can go back to Daniela also for one of her key messages from the session.
The key message for the session is that we need to have people at the center of ideal cities. Otherwise, ideal cities would be not ideal, and I would say nor cities. On the top of that, I think that we have, as researchers, scholars, experts, practitioners, something to do, which have a methodology to assess and learn how works, something that works in the context. We need to have a very, sound methodology to know what works.
Thank you. Yeah, people at the center. Then I would go to Paolo. I'm going backwards now. Paolo, what's for you at the center and the most important takeaway of the discussion?
Well, people are only the center in the city because people living mostly in the cities. So I think we have to think how to expand our cities and what is the trade-offs that we have to expand it in an unsustainable way. I think that we need to know how to plan and perhaps invest more in compacted cities than in sprawled cities that is a global phenomenon. So it's important to understand how city development is affecting so much the supply of ecosystem services that are so important. And they are making cities more vulnerable to climate change related events such as droughts, heat waves, and so I think that from an environmental point of view, the city needs to be more conceived and more think it instead of just develop as developed.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So we have, city development and how to plan and invest. Then I go to Roger very quickly.
Yeah, so I think the idea of accessibility is all about participation. And not only the accessibility issue around the rights of individuals, but also sustainable production and consumption requires participation because the solutions are vested in ordinary citizens coming together in neighborhoods. This is what we need. The other thing I would just add, if we see the cities in service to their regions, a lot of the challenges to cities is urban growth and all that in migration. And if we have cities in service of regions so that people do not have to migrate to the city in the first place, that provides the city the breathing space so it doesn't have to spend all of its time building a lot of infrastructure where people wanted to live in the communities they grew up in. They did not want to necessarily move to the big city, but we've created systems that don't encourage that. And so cities need to really think about how do they enable their regions so that people can live in place where they can preserve their cultures and preserve their ideals in how they want to live.
Okay, thank you so much. Then I turn to either Benjamin or Hannes.
No, thank you so much. And yeah, I couldn't agree more, Roger. I think from our perspective, it's all about participation. Like, how do we shape cities with and for the communities? Because there is so much knowledge and experiences of what people need, what people require to live a prosperous and healthy life in equality with others, right? So I think it's about shaping enabling environments which ensures that nothing is done without us, right? Because urban policy and practice impacts our everyday life throughout our life course. And I think just another point is to really make everything we can, specifically national governments, to empower and resource local and regional governments to really be at the forefront of solving some of the most pressing issues we see today, some of the most pressing issues and challenges of urbanization. And that, going back to Roger's point, requires participation, like ensuring the enabling environment for local and regional governments to take the lead, but also to really work together with their communities to shape the future we want to see.
Thank you, Hannes. Benjamin, do you sign off of that or you want to add something?
I can add something very, very quickly. I always think that, we don't exclude on purpose. I don't think cities purposefully exclude people. So maybe one piece of advice I could give is, like, I know we are all practitioners, and maybe something we need to take into account, like when we develop project when we work on initiative, to always ask ourselves, who is actually missing around the table? Who has been excluded because we didn't think about including them at the first place? And I think once we have done that, the second question to ask ourselves is, what do we need to do to actually support meaningful participation? Because it's not just inviting people to contribute, it's also giving them the tools and sometimes explaining those difficult concepts in a way that it's easy to grasp. And very often we expect participation by just inviting people, but it doesn't happen like this. There's a need to share learning, to work people in the first place, to actually try to understand these complex issues of urban planning and management and what it means and how we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. And I think, if I'm not wrong, I'm missing Jorge here. So would you like to also add something to what has been said? I think we're already said a lot of very good things, but maybe you have one last comment from your end.
To me, Isabel?
Yeah, would you like to add something from
what I have learned in this rich panel is that we development tools and knowledge enough until now. We know what we need to do, and we saw in this panel the academia, the civil society, and we need to be together to pressure the politicians, I think, because in the politics we have the scale and the velocity that we need to change this thing. So this is my final message. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I think that's really good for me to wrap up just with our extended time with the points mentioned on policy, on looking, asking critical questions, who's not at the table, looking at access, at community participation, at planning, and also at the people, first and foremost, who are at the center of all of this. And I think we had a very great discussion. I learned personally a lot. I hope that all the participants that have joined us will look at the projects mentioned, and we will be sharing these as well. later on. Thank you to the great speakers. Thank you to our partners, the World Blind Union, the Sustainable Cities Institute, to the University of Bologna and Paris-Saclay, represented by Daniela, and also to Roger Petri and Paolo da Silva. So thank you very much. And yeah, wish you a nice rest of the day and take care.